Good evening, everyone. My name is Sergeant Robinson Hewitt. I'm with Community Affairs Bureau Outreach Division. Our main mission is to make sure that we build strong relationship or stronger relationship with our communities. We notice that there's a lot of times when members of our communities are not aware of certain organizations that are out there to help them. Right now we have the overdose epidemic in the entire country. What our plan is in community affairs is to make sure that the overdoses that we saw last year does not occur this year. We have partnered up with AMUDIM, and they are so wonderful with instructions. I believe that education is the key to making sure that our community gets engaged and that they know of the different resources that are available when it comes to opioid addiction, treatment. We heard from Lower East Side. They are pretty good with the end part, because a lot of times when you see someone overdose and they go to the hospital, after that they come out, no one is there to hold their hand and guide them and say, hey, this is what you need. You know, like David said, change lives, build futures. There's a lot of times that people just need that one help. And this is where we get the organizations to come in and make sure that people are equipped with the information that they need. Without further ado, I don't want to take up too much time. Let me introduce you to Mr. David Kushner. He's with AMUDIM.
Good evening, everybody. How is everyone doing today? I just want to, before I begin, publicly thank the Community Council as well as the NYPD, specifically the Community Affairs Bureau, not to leave anybody else out, but we've been working together with Community Affairs in all 5 boroughs under Inspector Vallegra's leadership, and it's been something that has been received incredibly well throughout the city in all 5 boroughs, and it really is a pleasure knowing that the police department really cares about the community and works hard to get this type of programming and this type of information out to the general public. So obviously, through the introductions, everybody knows I'm going to talk a little bit about the opioid epidemic. I'm going to talk about 4 things specifically. Number 1, is there really a crisis? Number 2, what are opioids? Number 3, what is Narcan? And number 4, what each of us in this room that are not law enforcement officers or first responders or EMTs or members of FDNY are working in an ER, what we as good, upstanding citizens with good hearts that want to help our community members and in some situations maybe even family members, what we could do to help them. So the first question is, and I apologize, I'm running through it quickly, is there really a crisis? The simple answer is yes. The disease of addiction, and it is a disease because there is nobody at 9 or 10 years old that says, when I grow up, I want to be an addict. And there's nobody that wakes up in the morning, no matter what age, that says, I want to be an addict. And the truth is, the disease of addiction doesn't discriminate. It's hitting every gender, every race, every religion, every socioeconomic class, every borough. It's everywhere. There's not a person in this city who doesn't know somebody who's been negatively affected by this epidemic of addiction. And just to give a small glimpse, the fact is that there are more New Yorkers that die from drug overdoses than homicides, suicides, and motor vehicle crashes all combined. It is the single leading cause of premature death in all of New Yorkers, no matter what age, and over 80% of those overdose deaths involve opiates. It is a big problem, and there are things that we can do to help. So what are opiates? First of all, opiate, opioid, it's the same word. They're interchangeable: potato, potato, tomato, tomato, opiate, opioid, no difference. Basically what they are is they're painkillers. They take away a person's pain, be it a physical pain, an emotional pain, a psychological pain. They take somebody's pain away, give them a sense of a euphoric detachment, if you will. But from a medical standpoint, in addition to taking the pain away, it also causes their breathing to slow down, and in an overdose, it actually causes it to stop. there's many different forms and many different things that fall into the family of opiates. Obviously, we all know about heroin and fentanyl, but there's many different prescription drugs as well. And when we go beyond the prescription drugs, and when we go beyond the heroin, what's really having the most devastating impact is fentanyl. Fentanyl is simply a synthetic opiate. It's a man-made opiate that is extremely fast-acting and incredibly strong. To give you an idea of how strong it is, I look around the room, and I'm sure most, if not all of you, know somebody who, in their last days or weeks of life, were in a hospice or in a hospital and were given, palliative care or hospice care, and were on a morphine IV in order to make them more comfortable. When they say make them more comfortable, it simply means we're going to take away their pain so they don't suffer. But there's not much more we could do for them medically. The fact is, that IV morphine they're giving them to take away that pain and make them more comfortable in their last days and weeks of life, the fentanyl on the street out there is 50 to 100 times stronger than that morphine. Just to give you an idea of how strong and how potent it is. And it's not showing up in the prescription forms as patches and lollipops. It's showing up laced into other drugs. It's showing up laced into marijuana. It's showing up laced into cocaine. It's showing up as an additive in the heroin. And even in the more advanced situations, some of these illicit labs that are making it even have their own pill presses. And they're making their own pills and having them stamped as if they're Vicodin or Oxys or Percocets, but have this fentanyl inside of it. It's extremely dangerous. We know lots of people out there say, oh, the guy that I buy my drugs from, he would never sell me bad stuff. And you know what? It may be true. He may not sell it to you intentionally. But the fact of the matter is, between the illicit labs, whether they're here in America or in any continent around the globe, South America, Africa, Asia, Europe, wherever it's coming from, there's got to be at least 10 or 12 different hands it's going through before it's getting to the guy selling behind the counter in the bodega or the guy on the street corner that you're buying from. So the guy you're buying from, you may trust him, but the amount of hands it's coming through before it even gets to him, I guarantee you, they are not all upstanding, well-meaning, good guys that wouldn't sell bad stuff. And that's how a lot of the stuff is getting on the street. And it's unintentional. How do the opiates really work, though? Inside of our brains, inside of our skulls, and the outside of our brains, there are little tiny follicles about the thickness of a strand of hair, but much, much shorter, called pain receptors or opiate receptors. When people take painkillers or opiates, whether they prescription or non-prescription illegal drugs, what it does is it creates a film, almost a coating, around those receptors so the signal can no longer get to your brain. If you're in a car accident and you break your leg, in the hospital they're going to give you painkillers to make you more comfortable. That doesn't mean your leg isn't broken. It just means you're not feeling the pain anymore. And it's the same way whether it's an illegal drug or it's a prescription drug. So the question we get asked most often is, what puts any one person at a greater risk for an overdose than anybody else? So there's a few things, and I'm going to run through them very quickly. First and foremost, anytime you're taking opiates, even if it's a prescription drug, it must meet all four of the following qualifications. 1, has to be a legitimate pain. 2, has to be prescribed by a legitimate doctor. 3, it must be filled in a legitimate pharmacy. And 4, it must be both taken and disposed of in a proper way according to medical advice. The second thing, changes in tolerance. And this works both on the way up and on the way down. What do I mean by that? On the way up, if people start off taking an opiate for a legitimate reason, following a surgery, following an accident, and they wind up getting hooked on it, okay? And their doctor is not able to manage their pain appropriately. So they start seeking ways of managing their pain on their own. So they, outside of proper medical supervision, decide, hey, I need more than what the doctor's willing to prescribe me. So they start deciding on their own what dosages they should take and what drugs they should take and what ways to remove their own pain. When you do that outside of proper medical supervision, you're building up a tolerance, and by deciding the amounts you need on your own, without the medical background and proper supervision, you're taking a very high risk that you're going to wind up overdosing. That's what I mean by on the way up, as you start using more and more and more. But the reverse is also true. Very often we hear after someone dies of an overdose from their family, from their friends and their community members, it can't be true. It couldn't have been an overdose. They've been clean for 3 years. They just got out of rehab. They were doing so well lately. And you know what? Most of the time that's true. But it was still an overdose. Why? Because a person who is clean after having a substance abuse or addiction issue, at some point they built up their tolerance from when they first started using till the time they got clean. And then they hit a speed bump in life. Whether it was a loved one that passed away, or they lost their job, or they had a bad breakup with their significant other, whatever it is that caused them to fall off the wagon. Unfortunately, many times that happens, they don't go back to the original dose they started using with the first time they ever used. They go back to the dose that they were most familiar with right before they got clean. And their body doesn't have a resistance or a tolerance still built up to that amount, and it sends them into an overdose. And the last major risk factor is people who use opiates alone. Because of that film, that coating over the pain receptors that tell the brain, ouch, something is wrong, because they don't have that ability and their brain's not getting that message, when something is going wrong, they don't have the ability to recognize it themselves. So if somebody's using alone and they start having trouble breathing, or they start going in and out of consciousness, they don't realize it. But if somebody else is there with them, they could realize it, and they could call 911 to get an ambulance there, or to get a doctor there, or to administer Narcan, or to get them the help that they so desperately need. So what is this Narcan I keep talking about? It is a completely safe, very effective, not 1,000% of the time, medication that does two things. It reverses the effects of opiate-related overdoses and helps restore breathing. It has absolutely no effect if opiates aren't present. It has zero negative health risks, zero risks of dependence, nothing in there you could be allergic to. There's no risk of overdosing. There's no minimum age. There's no maximum age, no minimum weight, no maximum weight. It is an extremely safe and very effective medication. It stays in your system for about 60 to 90 minutes. And that's important. Why is that important? Because opiates usually stay in your system for about 6 hours. So if a person is administered Narcan and it works, the Narcan may wear off before the opiates wear off. So somebody who's administered Narcan and brought back from the brink of death, once the Narcan wears off, if the opiates are still in their system, it could send them back into an overdose state. So it's very important that even if Narcan is administered successfully and it saves their life, that they still get the proper medical attention. How do we know if we should administer Narcan? How do we know if someone's experiencing an overdose? There are 3 main signs that could indicate a potential overdose. Somebody could show 1, 2, or even all 3 of these and it's not an overdose. It could be a heart attack, it could be a stroke, it could be a diabetic emergency, it could be something else. But these are the 3 main signs. 1, slowed, shallow, or stopped breathing. 2, unresponsiveness. They're just like out cold, or you can't get them to snap into it. Or 3, a bluish or grayish color around your fingertips or around your lips, because their circulation is affected. If you run into someone that is showing any one of those 3 things, first thing you want to do is see if they're really responsive or not. They could just be sleeping. So if it's somebody you know, You could walk up to them, rub their chest with your knuckles. You could grab them by the shoulder. If it's somebody you don't like, you could slap them across the face. If it is a stranger that you don't know, I would not recommend walking up to a stranger that's on the street corner sleeping on a park bench and start shaking them. But you can go up to them, hey buddy, you all right? You need anything? If they really are unresponsive, the next thing you want to do, you call 911. You get the next level, a higher level of care and help on the way. While you are waiting for 911 to arrive, you could administer the Narcan. Each one of these bags, and we're going to give everybody here a bag. They're in the corner, Sergeant Robinson, if you want to help, thank you. Each one of these bags has 2 full doses of a single spray Narcan, okay? After you administer Narcan, one of 2 things will happen. Either they will wake up and it will work, or it won't work. There is no in between. There is no such thing as working halfway. If it does not work, you wait 4 or 5 minutes, and you can give the other dose. Again, each one of these has 2 doses. By the time you hit that next 5-minute mark, the 911 response times I know have been getting much better. So somebody should be there. Many of the police officers carry it. All the FDNY, fire trucks, and ambulances all carry it, so on and so forth. If it does work, there's one of a few things that may happen. They could be showing signs of withdrawal because you now made the opiate ineffective. You didn't get rid of the opiates from their system. You just made the symptoms of the effects of the opiate reverse the effects, but the opiates are still in their system. So they could be showing some signs of withdrawal. Dizziness, nausea, headache, and they could also, the pain will return because now the opiate is ineffective. So in a desperate attempt to regain their high and take back away the pain that led them to taking opiates to begin with, they may try to regain their high by taking more of whatever's around them. Do not let them. It will have 0 effect on them while the Narcan's in the system. But we've seen many times, somebody administers Narcan, the person wakes up, great, he looks good, he feels good, he says he's fine, we left, and then the guy tried to regain his high, wound up taking 2, 3, 4, 5 times his regular dose, and when the Narcan wore off, it sent him into a sudden overdose that killed them. Inside these kits, there's a few things. There are 2 doses of the Narcan. There is an instruction sheet, a basic review of everything I talked about here. There is a prescription card that allows you to not only carry the Narcan, but administer it to anybody. There is a pair of gloves, which is always smart to have. There is a rescue breathing mask. If the person is not breathing and you know how to use it, feel free to use it. If you do not know how to use it, then don't worry about it. And then there are 2 alcohol swabs. The alcohol swabs are here for a simple reason: bureaucracy. We used to give out the injectable Narcan. When we switched to the more effective nasal spray, the New York City Department of Health, which is actually the ones who provide these kits, decided instead of giving their warehouse full of alcohol swabs to a clinic or hospital, that they still mandate that we give them out into these bags. So we do what we're told, but if you want to use them to clean your sunglasses or whatever, go right ahead. If there is an expiration date, if it's coming close or you used it, just give us a call. Our number's in the bag. We're more than happy to replace it. The last thing I want to mention is very simple. In 2011, when this started to become a much bigger problem, law enforcement agencies around the state, led by the NYPD, got together with the prosecutors, the district attorneys, and the state legislature, and they passed what's called the 911 Good Samaritan laws. Unfortunately, many of these overdoses that's happened and are witnessed, and nobody calls to get them help because people didn't want to get in trouble. So they passed these laws to protect, whether it's underage drinking, marijuana offenses, paraphernalia offenses, sharing offenses, everything from an A2 felony, which is 8 ounces, a half a pound of illegal drugs and down. They passed a law that says the person calling to get help for the other guy and the guy you're calling to get help for, they're both shielded from prosecution. because it was more important to them to save lives than it was to lock people up for relatively small crimes. And for that, I think the NYPD deserves a big round of applause.